What you're about to listen to is the story of the bloodiest war in Nigeria's history. A war that took the lives of over 100,000 soldiers and killed almost 2 million innocent people, most of them children. This is the story of the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War, a war that lasted 3 brutal years from July 6, 1967 to January 15, 1970. To understand how Nigeria got to this dark place, we need to go back to the beginning.
It will for us be the price for freedom. Our people here have for a long time been prepared for this eventuality, and I am confident of their readiness. I think that when it does come, that the people on the other side would be surprised as to what they're going to get.
The so-called rising sun of Biafra is set forever. It will be a great disservice for anyone to continue to use the word Biafra to refer to any part of the East Central state of Nigeria.
When Nigeria got her independence from Great Britain in 1960, the country was already broken from inside. 3 major ethnic groups, the Igbos, the Hausa Fulani, and the Yorubas, were forced to live together in one nation. But these groups were very different from each other. The Igbos lived in the southeast. They made up about 60 to 70% of the population there. Most of them were Christians before the white man came. Igbo people lived in the societies where everyone had a voice. Yes, they had kings called Igwes, but real power belonged to the people. In Igbo land, respect was not given to someone because of their family name. Respect was earned through hard work and wealth creation. The Igbos believed strongly in the self-made man. If you worked hard and became successful, people respected you. This is why many of Nigerians' biggest businessmen have been Igbos. Their culture taught them to chase success and build wealth through their own efforts. Now, the Hausa Fulani people of the north were completely different. They made up about 65% of the northern population, and most of them were Muslims. For many years, they lived under powerful emirs and sultans, religious and political leaders who ruled over them. In the north, people were taught to obey their leaders without question. It was not just a civic duty, it was a religious duty. Unlike the Igbos, there was nothing wrong with a man living a simple life as a farmer or a cattle header. They valued religious discipline more than personal ambition. But here's the problem this created. While the north was stable and orderly, it was also less economically active. Northerners were generally less open to new ideas. Many of them rejected Western education completely, preferring Islamic education instead. Listen to this shocking fact. When Nigeria got independence in 1960, only 2% of Northerners could read and write English. In the southeast, 19.2% could read and write English. Think about that difference. The Yoruba of the southwest were somewhere in between. They made up about 75% of the southwestern population. They were mostly Christians, but they also had many Muslims and people who followed traditional Yoruba religion. Yoruba kings called Obas ruled with the help of chiefs and priests. The Yorubas, like the Igbos, valued hard work and ambition. But while Igbos focused on business and wealth, Yorubas channeled their energy into arts and education. This is why many of Nigeria's greatest artists and writers like Fela Kuti and Professor Wole Soyinka are Yorubas. Now, the Yorubas and Igbos generally got along well with each other. The real problem was between the Hausa Fulani of the north and the southern ethnic groups. History shows us that before the white man came, northern Islamic armies had attacked Yoruba kingdoms many times. The famous Sokoto Caliphate, led by Sultan Othman Dan Fodio, had waged jihad against the Yorubas. Then, in the 1914, something happened that changed everything. A British man named Frederick Lugard brought the northern and southern regions together to create what we now call Nigeria. This event is called the Nigerian Amalgamation of 1914. Many historians believe that this amalgamation was a trick. The theory is simple. The British wanted to control Nigeria easily. The South was more educated and harder to control. The North was larger and easier to control. So by joining them together, the British gave power to Northern elites who would do what the Britain wanted. And listen to this. From 1914 onwards, the British started putting Northerners in key leadership positions in the colonial government. Even though Southerners were better educated, they were only given lower positions. When the fight for Nigerian independence started, it was mostly Yoruba and Igbo intellectuals who led the struggle. Many Northern elites did not even want independence. They feared that independence would mean losing their special positions they enjoyed under British rule. So here is what happened. The Northern leaders agreed to support independence, but only on one condition: that the new Nigerian government would keep the same colonial power structure that favored the North. The Igbo and Yoruba leaders were desperate for independence, so they agreed. On October 1st, 1960, Nigeria became independent. The country was divided into 3 regions, a very large northern region and 2 smaller eastern and western regions. The Prime Minister was Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, a northerner. His party, the Northern People's Congress, governed with the Igbo-dominated National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons. The Yoruba-dominated Action Group became the opposition party, but this system was broken from the start. Nigerian parties were not based on ideas or policies. They were based on ethnicity. Southwesterners voted for the AG, Southeasterners voted for the NCNC, Northerners voted for the NPC. And because the North was the largest region, the NPC was guaranteed to always win. This meant the North would always control Nigeria. The Igbos, with their entrepreneurial spirit, began moving to different parts of Nigeria. They went to Lagos, to Benin, to Port Harcourt, and even to major northern cities like Kano and Kaduna. Everywhere they went, they built businesses and created wealth. But success breeds jealousy. Soon, many northerners began to feel uncomfortable with how successful the Igbos were becoming in their land. Listen to what one northern leader said in an interview.
One thing I've noticed, Premier, while I've been here, is that Northerners seem to have, I might almost call it, obsession about the Igbos. Could you perhaps explain that to me?
Well, the Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is mainly to dominate everybody. If they go to a village, to a town, they want to monopolize everything in that area. If you put them in a labor camp as a laborer, within a year they will try to emerge as headman of that camp, and so on. Well, in the past, our people were not alive to their responsibilities, because you can see from our northernization policy that in 1952, when I came here, there weren't 10 northerners in our civil service here. Then I tried to have it northernized, and now all important posts are being held by northerners.
Is this policy of filling all key posts in the north solely with northerners and not with other Nigerians a temporary or a permanent one?
In actual fact, what it is a northerner first. If you can't get a northerner, then we take an expatriate like yourself on contract. If we can't, then we can employ another Nigerian, but on contract too. This is going to be permanent, I should say, as far as I can foresee, because it will be rather dangerous to see the number of boys who are now turning from all our learning institutions coming out with having no work to do. I'm sure whichever government of the day might be, it will feel rather embarrassed, and it might even lead to bloodshed.
Doesn't this damage the idea, sir, of all people in all regions in Nigeria being fellow citizens of one country?
Well, it might, but you are, new to our region, but how many northerners are employed in the east or in the west? The answer is no. And if there may be 10 laborers employed only in the 2 regions.
This was the environment Nigeria found itself in. Tension was building, and it was about to explode. By early 1966, most Nigerians were tired of the ruling elite. Stories of corruption, vote rigging, and secret deals with foreign companies were everywhere. The masses were suffering while politicians lived in luxury. On January 15, 1966, Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nziegu, an Igbo officer in the Nigerian army, led a revolutionary coup against the federal government. The coup plotters assassinated Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Amadu Bello, and the Premier of the Western Region, Chief Samuel Okintola. But suspiciously, President Nnamdi Azikiwe survived. He was out of the country on holiday when the coup happened. The coup ultimately failed. It was stopped by another factor of the Nigerian army led by Major General Justin Aguiyi Ironsi, who also led the Igbo. After securing the surrender of the coup plotters, Aguiyi Ironsi became the Nigerian's military head of state. Now, here is where things get very suspicious. Both the man who led the coup and the man who stopped the coup were Igbos. 4 out of 5 plotters were Igbos, and Aguiyi Ironsi did not execute any of the coup plotters after stopping them. Most importantly, no significant Igbo leader was killed in the coup. President Azikiwe escaped because of his convenient holiday. Michael Okpara, the premier of the Eastern region, also survived. Many northerners began to believe that the whole thing was a setup, the master plan to put Aguiyi Ironsi in power and give control of Nigeria to the Igbos. And so, on July 26, 1966, Northern Army officers staged a revenge coup. This time, they succeeded. Major General Aguiyi Ironsi was assassinated. Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, a northerner, became Nigeria's new military head of state. But the revenge did not end with the coup. What happened next was horrific. In the 3 months following the coup, between 8,000 and 30,000 Igbos living in the north were attacked, killed, and robbed by local mobs. Their businesses were destroyed, their homes were burnt, their churches were vandalized. Over 1 million Igbos fled back to the east, leaving behind everything they had built. Some even had to abandon children born from inter-ethnic marriages. Their survivors returned to the east with shocking stories of betrayal and trauma. The Nigerian dream was dead. The military governor of the eastern region was Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. He began calling on all Igbos across Nigeria to return home. It was no longer safe for them anywhere else. Rumors spread that the eastern region was planning to break away from Nigeria. These rumors seemed confirmed when a plane carrying imported weapons crashed in Enugu, the eastern capital. Colonel Ojukwu did not hide his anger. He openly criticized General Yakubu Gowon's government for failing to protect Igbos who were being killed across the country. Tensions reached a breaking point. In January 1967, General Gowon and Colonel Ojukwu agreed to meet in Aburi, Ghana to try to resolve the crisis. The meeting lasted 2 days, from January 4th to 5th. Ojukwu came well prepared. He presented clear demands: greater political autonomy for the eastern region, greater control over revenue from oil in the southeast, and a restructuring of the Nigerian army to give more power to the regions. According to Ojukwu, Gowon agreed to all these demands. These agreements became known as the Aburi Accord. But when Gowon returned to Nigeria, he changed his mind. Instead of honoring the Aburi Accord, he divided Nigeria into 12 states and turned Nigeria into an American-style federation, but without giving the states real autonomy or control over their resources. For the Easterners, this was the final betrayal. On May 30, 1967, after consulting with traditional rulers and chiefs of the Eastern region, Colonel Ojukwu made a historic announcement. The Eastern region was succeeding from Nigeria and establishing the independent state of Biafra. With the support of southeastern leaders, Ojukwu cut all ties with the Nigerian army and became General Ojukwu, president and commander-in-chief of the Biafran army. The streets of Biafra erupted in celebration. For many, this was a restoration of their pre-colonial sovereignty. It was the beginning of a bright new dawn, but the celebrations would not last long. The Nigerian government's response was swift and brutal. They declared war on Biafra. The Biafran army had no air force, no navy, and no chronic shortage of weapons and manpower. But General Ojukwu was surprisingly confident. In an interview, he said, "If civil war comes, and I do think it is imminent, it will for us be the price of freedom. Our people here have for a long time been prepared for this eventuality, and I am confident of their readiness. I think that when it does come, the people on the other side would be surprised at what they are going to get, and I am confident that I will not last long." But the reality was different. The Nigerian military was larger, better funded, better trained, and had the support of Britain and other world powers. Everyone expected the war to be over in weeks, or at most 6 months. They were wrong. Despite being composed largely of untrained young men and teenage boys, the Biafran army proved incredibly resilient. They held off the Nigerian forces for 3 brutal years. The early campaigns of the Nigerian forces were successful. They quickly reclaimed significant Biafran cities, but after nearly a year of fighting, the Biafran army began to stand its ground. Inside Biafra, civilians tried to carry on living normally, with most men and boys on the battlefield. It was up to the women to manage the day-to-day running of the country. But as the war dragged on, any hope of normal life faded away. Both sides tried to peace talks multiple times, but all attempts failed. That's when General Gowon's administration made perhaps the single most destructive political decision in West African history. They imposed a total economic blockade on Biafra. The blockade cut off all food and ammunition supplies by land, air, and sea. Before the war, protein in the Biafran diet came mainly from locally sourced seafood and dry stockfish imported from Norway. Other protein sources like chicken, pork, and beef were too expensive for most people, but the blockade stopped the importation of Norwegian stockfish and prevented local fishermen from accessing the seas. Protein supplies disappeared. The national diet became almost 100% starch. What happened next shocked the world. An estimated 2 million civilians, most of them children, died from malnutrition. They suffered from a protein deficiency disease called kwashiorkor. Images of millions of starving Biafran children appeared on TV screens worldwide. This was one of the global community's earliest introductions to the now infamous image of the starving African child. Stomachs swollen, ribs showing, eyes vacant, children dying slow, painful deaths. The Nigerian government's reasoning was that the blockade would be a short, sharp shock that would force Ojukwu to surrender quickly. They believed that seeing his people suffer, Ojukwu would have no choice but to give up. But they were wrong again. While the Nigerian government had British support, Biafra had secretly secured a powerful ally, France. Although only Tanzania, Gabon, Ivory Coast, Zambia, and Haiti officially recognized Biafra, France had taken a secret interest in the breakaway state. French President Charles de Gaulle called Biafra a just and noble cause. Working with French-aligned governments in Ivory Coast and Gabon, France provided Biafra with weapons, mercenary fighters, and as much as food as could be smuggled past the Nigerian blockade. France also publicized the Biafra's cause internationally, describing the situation as genocide. When France's involvement was discovered, protests erupted in Lagos. Many accused France of prolonging the war for selfish reasons. And they were right. France's involvement had nothing to do with justice or liberty. It was all about oil. Later, investigations revealed that the French state-owned oil company ELF had secured lucrative trading agreements with Biafra. If Biafra had successfully succeeded, these agreements would have given France access to 7% of Nigeria's oil supply. Since oil was discovered in Nigeria in 1956, the British company Shell BP had enjoyed sole access to Nigerian oil. France wanted a piece of the pie. General Ojukwu did little to hide his French connection. As early as the first year of the war, he announced that French would be made compulsory in Biafran schools. In his own words, he wanted his people to benefit from the rich culture of the French-speaking world. As the death toll rose exponentially, the whole world became aware of the carnage. Protests and counter-protests took place in London and New York. Some blamed Ojukwu for continuing a war he knew he couldn't win, putting his personal ambition ahead of millions of lives. Others saw the blockade as nothing short of genocide, a vicious attempt to exterminate the Igbo people once and for all. Ojukwu was accused of giving his people false hope by reporting fake victories and making false promises about the war's imminent end. The Nigerian government, for its part, refused to back down. In a speech, General Gowon said,
I do not wish to say anything on this occasion that might be regarded as prejudicial to the peace talks now going on in Kampala, Uganda. But in the words of Mr. Asika, the rebel leaders ought to know when enough is enough. They should call a halt to the shameless deception of innocent Igbos with reports of fictitious victories on the battlefronts. They should appreciate that the so-called diplomatic recognition by dubious characters cannot, in the least, alter the course of Nigerian history. It is sheer wickedness for Ojukwu and his clique to continue to goad innocent citizens to support rebellion and lay down their lives for a cause that is not just. The rebel leaders know in their hearts of hearts that all their false propaganda about genocide and massacre derives from personal ambition and the haunting fear of their own future and safety. Consequently, they do not know when to stop. I call on those who claim to love Nigeria and the Igbos to face realities and advise the people of the East Central State to lay down their arms and return to the fold. It is not enough for organizations and individuals to ask the federal government to cease hostilities while ignoring the evil intentions of the rebels. I honestly believe it is in the true interest of the Igbos that they return to the fatherland. I am satisfied that all other Nigerians have learned the lesson of our most recent history and the current civil war. And I pray to God that there will never be a repetition.
But Biafra was more than just a rebel of military force. Ojukwu assembled a team of elite writers and artists to spread the Biafran message. Political cartoons appeared everywhere, demonizing not just Nigerian military, but Nigerian citizens in general. Internationally, notable figures like Chinua Achebe and Gabriel Okara publicized the plight of the Biafran people. The Biafran story became front-page news worldwide. On May 29, 1969, something shocking happened. Bruce Mayrock, an American student at Columbia University, set himself on fire at the United Nations headquarters in New York. He was protesting what he believed was a genocide against Biafra. He died the next day. With international pressure mounting, Nigerians' allies ramped up their military support to help break the Biafran resistance once and for all. In the last week of December 1969, Nigerian forces launched a final major attack called Operation Tailwind. It was led by Colonel Olusegun Obasanjo, a man who would later become a two-time president of Nigeria. After over 3 weeks of heavy fighting, the last two Biafran strongholds, Owerri and Uli, fell to Nigerian forces. General Ojukwu, unwillingly to go down with his failed state, fled by plane to Ivory Coast on January 13, 1970. He left his deputy, Philip Effiong, to negotiate Biafra's surrender. On January 14, 1970, Philip Effiong officially surrendered to General Yakubu Gowon. In his victory speech, Gowon declared, "The so-called Republic of Biafra has ceased to exist. It will be a great disservice for anyone to continue to use the word Biafra to refer to any part of the East Central state of Nigeria. The tragic chapter of violence has just ended. We are at the dawn of national reconciliation." But Gowon also had harsh words for foreign governments that supported Biafra. There are governments and organizations whose so-called assistance will not be welcomed. These are the governments and organizations which sustained the rebellion. They are thus guilty of the blood of thousands who perished because of the prolongation of futile Biafran resistance. They did not act out of love for humanity. The purpose was to disintegrate Nigeria and Africa and impose their will on us. To say the Nigerian government did not do enough to bring healing after the war would be a gross understatement. Even the federal troops deployed to help resettle survivors were accused of terrible behaviors. Women reported being molested and raped. Men said the property was looted. When a journalist confronted a military officer about these allegations, he casually dismissed them, saying, "In every war, there is always one or two or three who will behave out of the general plan."
I have complaints about the behaviour of your troops. Many women say they've been molested and raped. Men say their property has been taken away from them, looted. Do you know anything about this?
I don't think that is true. To say general looting and raping and the rest of it, that couldn't be true. In every war, there's always one or two odd soldiers who will behave in the out of the general pattern. And well, I won't deny that there will be cases of this. And you do realize that it's not very easy for officers to be there all the time to check this type of thing. But everything is being done to keep the soldiers out of the villages, out of the roads, out of the towns.
But here in the centre of this town, Phil, I've personally seen soldiers taking household gear away from people's homes, loading it onto trucks and driving away. A sergeant major stopped one truck and made them take some stuff off.
That sometimes we carry refugees with their belongings from the towns to the villages.
Yeah.
This could be.
But this was just property being taken out of a house, furniture, a bedstead, among other things.
Well, that might be one of the cases, the few odd cases I've talked about. But there are always people around who will check this type of thing,
Have the federal troops behaved badly since they came here? Have they beaten people?
That's seizing of their things. Seizing of their properties.
They seize property?
Properties, and they're forcing some girls and ladies.
They are
forcing them.
Forcing themselves on girls and ladies?
Forcing them. Taking some wives from people try to do something in their lives.
Have they been killing people?
No. They don't kill civilians.
Do they bring food in with them to feed the population?
In fact, they don't. We are starving since 3 days now. We haven't taken anything.
You are hungry?
We are hungry. Very, very. Even my children, you can see them in the house now, lying down. Nothing to take.
The Biafran money, when we give them, they say no. The Biafran money is of no use.
It's unused.
The war left millions of Igbos homeless, bereaved, and unemployed. But what the Nigerian government did next added insult to injury. Nigeria had changed its currency during the war, so that the Igbos who still held the old currency were left with worthless paper. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who was Nigeria's Commissioner of Finance at the time, came up with a solution: give every Easterner exactly 20 naira pounds, regardless of how much money they had in their bank accounts before the war. Think about that. A man who had millions in the bank before the war got 20 pounds. A man who had thousands got 20 pounds. Everyone got 20 pounds. This policy was clearly designed to cripple the economic recovery of the Igbo middle and upper classes. At the same time, the Gowon administration passed the indigenization decree, which forced all foreign companies in Nigeria to sell shares to Nigerian citizens. But with most Igbos having only 20 pounds, the main beneficiaries were wealthy Yoruba and Hausa Fulani elites. Even today, some of Nigerians' wealthiest families trace their fortunes back to shares acquired under Gowon's indigenization policy. 50 years have passed since the end of the Civil War, but the ghost of Biafra continues to haunt Nigeria. In 2011, 1 year after the death of General Ojukwu, a group called the Indigenous People of Biafra, IPOB, emerged as the latest Biafran secessionist movement calling for a second breakaway. The Nigerian government's response have been heavy-handed, showing how little has been learned from the war. IPOB leader Nnamdi Kanu has been arrested and harassed numerous times, which has only energized his base and built his following. The Biafran question now occupies a menacing position in Nigeria's political landscape, and it's becoming clear that the government can no longer sweep the matter under the carpet. IPOB is not only independence movement threatening Nigerian unity. The oil-rich Niger Delta region, which despite being the source of Nigerians' wealth, remains one of the most underdeveloped areas in the country, has been riddled with militant groups like the Niger Delta Avengers and the Niger Delta Greenland Justice Mandate. Similarly, groups in the Yoruba heartland have been calling for a creation of a separate Oduduwa Republic. What unites all these groups in one belief? Nothing has really changed since colonial times. The only group with a vested interest in keeping Nigeria together in the Northern Elite. And honestly, it is easy to see why. A breakup of Nigeria would likely lead to economic ruin for many rich Northerners. They could find themselves in a landlocked country with no access to the sea, no oil revenue, and a large undereducated population, when an estimated 50% of women have no formal education. When Frederick Lugard created Nigeria in 1914, he probably had no idea how badly the Nigerian project would turn out. What has become very clear over a century later is that Nigeria, in its current state, simply does not work. For a country as large and diverse as Nigeria, the concentration of power in the federal government is a recipe for disaster. Large sections of the population continue to express feelings of marginalization and disconnection from the federal government. Many has been putting forward a sensible case for restructuring, devolving power from the federal government to the regions. This would mean giving each region power over its own resources and greater ability to decide its own destiny. But while this idea may be good for Nigeria as a whole, it would mean a loss of power for those who benefit from the current system. And these vested interests are the biggest stumbling blocks preventing any sensible conversation about the state of the nation. For the sake of the many innocent and peace-loving Nigerians, one can only hope and pray that the Nigerian establishment chooses to loosen its tight grip on power before it's too late. The Biafran War claimed over 2 million lives. How many more must die before Nigeria learns its lesson? This has been the story of Nigeria's darkest chapter, a story of betrayal, greed, starvation, a senseless death, a story that continues to haunt us today. If this story shocked and enlightened you, if it opened your eyes to the truth about Nigeria's history, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is Crazy Real Life, and we bring you the full stories that is not being shared by the mainstream media. And drop a comment of what you think that can free Nigeria from its shackles of its all-time bondage. See you in the next content.